So you're trying to gather the favor of your new coach as well.
Absolutely. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. An abbreviated show coming up tomorrow as we lead you into pregame coverage of the South Carolina women in their opening game of the SEC tournament. Halftime show coming up next. Myself and Terry Ford right here on The Game.
Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. We're hanging till 3 here on the game. Thanks for, stopping in, whether you're in Columbia, Florence, Myrtle Beach, anywhere on the Game Network. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today. All right, Tyler, last night, and got to be there last night. The atmosphere was great.
Right.
I mean, that is what you're looking for. If I was a recruit and South Carolina was on my list and I was there last night, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I want to sign up for. Again, because a lot of that's and when you're recruiting, obviously you don't want 64 people in the place. Everybody's got their own hot dog vendor sitting next to them saying, hey, bub, you need something? I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
So it was a great atmosphere last night. And, there's a lot of talk. Okay, how do you lose? Why do you lose? Why do you get beat? And if you look at the stats of this basketball game, South Carolina made more buckets.
Mm-hmm. South
Carolina out-rebounded Tennessee. South Carolina made more threes.
Outscored them in the second half. And, yeah, I know the free throw line was a thing. We'll get to it. But the other part of it boils down to something so simple. Tennessee has a dude. To say the least.
That's a first-round pick in the NBA draft.
So, somebody that prior to the season, who is that?
Yeah.
You got to transfer from Northern Colorado? Okay, cool.
Couldn't say his last name.
Yeah, exactly.
Kinnick, Kanakik, Nokic.
Nobody knew about this guy.
No. He was second team All Big Sky. He's first team All SEC, if not first team All American. That's the jump that Connect has made from last year to this year.
Right.
Look, Rick Barnes will never admit this because you can't. Well, maybe you will because you're Rick Barnes. You've been around for 100 years. But if you gave Rick Barnes some of that Falker Truth serum, Rick Barnes will look at you and say, there's no way we knew he'd be this good.
Yeah, maybe he's, might work his way into the starting rotation, might be a bench guy for all we know.
No way we knew we were getting this.
Maybe one of your best players of all time when it's all said and done.
He's a difference maker. He makes Tennessee a legitimate threat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anytime South Carolina did anything good last night, he had an answer.
That was the thing. You and I were talking about the box score. If you just look at the box score and you didn't watch the game, you could do 9 for 23. What are you talking about?
Find me the 14 misses he had because I don't remember them.
I will say this. It felt like every one of those 9 makes sucked the momentum out of the game.
Oh, yeah.
It felt like every time South Carolina had something going, Connect would hit a shot.
Because it's like, okay, Studi made a 3. Well, then Connect made 1.
Oh, the one for me was first half. B.J. Mack nails a corner 3.
Yep.
Crowd gets lathered up. Connect gets the ball, dribbles up, and he's just dribbling the ball up the court. He gets about 30 feet. Zach Davis, I'd have been doing the same thing if I was Zach Davis. I'm not playing you 30 feet from the basket at this point. You're bringing the ball up. I figure you're going to run some offense. You guys are going to do something.
Right.
So Davis is giving him a few feet. Connect just goes, oh, wow, you give me some space. Pulls up from 30 and drains a 3. Place is like a library.
I was going to say they were excited for all of 5 seconds.
To me, and that's not the only, but the number one reason South Carolina walked off that court with an L is they have that guy. And you don't have a version of that guy. And that's no disrespect to anybody who laces them up for South Carolina. Look, Gamecocks are a good basketball team, man.
Sure.
If you watched that game last night, South Carolina belongs on the court with Tennessee.
Absolutely.
They do. They split this year, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't being disrespectful to the Gamecocks at all. They just don't have that guy.
Right.
There are a lot of teams in the country that don't have that guy. And that was the difference last night. Every time they needed a momentum-changing bucket or a shush-your-face bucket, Connect got the hoop.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, to me, that's where it boiled down to. I mean, really, when you take him away, again, I'm not trying to be mean to anybody that plays for the Volunteers. Take Connect off that team and just put a solid player in his place. It's not the same squad.
They're still good. But
they're just not this.
Yeah, they're not one of the best 4 teams in the country.
You know what they are? They're what Tennessee was last year.
Sure.
Or the year before.
Well,
this guy makes them different because Tennessee has struggled offensively the last few years despite they've become a good basketball program.
Yeah.
Their calling card is rugged defense,
right?
Getting in your grill, making you miserable on the defensive end of the court, and then figuring out the offense, right?
Sure.
Well, this year, you know what they figured out?
The offense.
That guy's really good. Let's
Yeah.
get him the rock.
Well,
exactly.
And you know, Coach Paris said this coming away from the first game they played and said it in the lead up to this one. You know he's going to get his. You know he's going to score somewhere between 25 and 30 points. More likely than not, go ahead and put that in the box score because it's just going to happen. The thing that South Carolina did really well in game number 1, just look at 2 of the compliments that he has on that offense in Adu and Ziegler. They scored a combined 8 points in that game in Knoxville. They scored 27 last night. Like, those guys got out there and contributed, and that is a big reason why Tennessee never surrendered the lead the entire time.
No, and in this, now it's a 7-game win streak. Coming into last night, in the 6-game Tennessee win streak, which has made them different, is Connect was only the leading scorer in 3 of those 6 games.
Right.
Basically, Connect is Connect. You don't want the other guys going cuckoo and starting to score a lot. And both Adu and Ziegler scored enough last night. They didn't go crazy,
Right.
but they scored enough to make a difference. And just with Connect, it's also, he has these spurts where he just makes buckets. The first game was the last 2.5 minutes where he scored 12 points.
12 points, yeah.
Just went nuts. So even his game line was a little deceiving because he really didn't affect the game till the very end when it really was, for the most part, almost over. But last night, in the worst possible moment for Gamecock fans, Connect, the game, I put down my little game notes here. Let me find it. Oh, hi, on video, Game TV. Game notes. Look at these babies. That's some scribble right there. Look at this mess. Look at that mess. Yeah, I look like a pharmacist having a seizure. Anyway.
See, I put mine in the notes app of my iPhone.
See, I write them like I'm old school with it. All right, so South Carolina cuts it to 24-22 in the first half. Connect then hits 3 threes in the last 3.5 minutes. 2 of those threes in the last, 2 minutes. And that changed everything. You go from 24-22, now you're down double digits going into the half. Boom, 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 he hits them. And you're like, well, what just happened to us?
Right.
And that changed the game.
It changed the game, but then right before halftime, I think Stute hits a layup, which brought it down to a 9-point game, and immediately Ziegler goes down to the other end, gets a layup of his own, and they have a 11-point lead going into half.
Hits that little teardrop thing because he's like 4'2".
Right.
Hit that little teardrop thing to put the lead back to double digits. And it's one of those things that you don't think of it then, but I'm like a mental hurdle. But if you got that thing, despite the fact you have shot the ball horribly, if you got that thing under double digits going into halftime, you feel like, all right, it's only 9, we're good. You know, we're down single digits. We can get ourselves together. We're a better offensive team than this, blah, blah, blah. But they go right back up 11, get that momentum changing hoop right at the end of the half.
Yeah.
And it was a game that the dude that pushes the boulder up the hill,
Right.
that guy, I felt like that was South Carolina all night. After that stretch where Connect hits the 3 threes, Ziegler gets a little teardrop right before the half, now you're the boulder guy pushing up the hill the rest of the game.
Right. And give them credit, they got it to a 3-point game there in the late stages, which up to that point, they had never really been able to mitigate that gap to anything less than like 7 or 8 for the most part. And I think Tennessee got out to a 14-point lead at one point in time, but South Carolina stormed back, and it looked like, hey, maybe they're catching fire at the right time, but unfortunately wasn't able to overcome it.
No, and that was the thing. That's where I want to give South Carolina so much credit. Is you kept clawing. You haven't come back from a big deficit all year.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, you were down 11-3 to Mississippi State early in that game, and then you got back even, and you were fine. The times you've been down big, Bama, Auburn, that the wheels fell off, right? No, the wheels, the windshield wipers, the bumpers, everything fell off. Last night, you're down 14. I know it's at home, but still, you're down 14. Every time it feels like you push the boulder up the hill a little bit, it rolls back on your face.
Right.
But credit to the Gamecocks is they just kept grinding it, and they got it to 3. And we'll get into that in a little bit too. That near end game scenario. I thought there was a couple of shot selection moments that you probably would want to have back in that stretch at the end if you're the Gamecocks.
Well, let's talk about shot selection. The first half, 17 attempted 3-pointers. They didn't dare drive in the lane. I get it. Tennessee's an imposing defense. They're one of the more physical teams in the entire country, we saw on display last night. But South Carolina was very hesitant to even try to get anything near the basket in the first half, and they were just chucking up threes. And you get to the point where you're like, this isn't your brand of offense. You're not playing in your comfort zone. And eventually, I think Michi was the first one to just try and bust through and say, okay, let's see how it goes. They got a little bit more aggressive in the second half, which, again, led them to making it a tight game towards the end. But, man, that first half, you left a lot to be desired offensively.
Yeah, and that's really the other part, too. With the first half, the offense, and they brought it up during the broadcast, is that, South Carolina, how many games have we seen this year we go, well, South Carolina in the first half have 12 made baskets and 10 assists off of 12 made baskets?
Right, a lot.
They had a game this year where they had, at one point, 22 assists on 25 made baskets.
Yes.
Last night, they were not moving the ball. There was a lot of dribble, stand, dribble, take a dribble, let's dribble, and there was a lot of standing.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of cutting, moving. And look, there's dribbling for a purpose, and there's dribbling. There's a lot of dribbling without a purpose last night in the first half. And then they're chucking a ton of threes. South Carolina shot around 50% inside the three-point line. Problem is, half their shots were from three.
Yeah.
That was an issue. And the first half, the offense was really stagnant. Now, part of that, and again, they brought this up during the broadcast, was that Tennessee, in the analysis of the game, was doing everything they could to cut the driving lanes. They wanted South Carolina to take threes. They're like, look, we're not letting you in the first game. We let you have your way on offense more than we should have. We're going to cut those lanes, and we're going to force you to beat us from three. And South Carolina kind of, well, in the words of the great Nick Saban, fell for the rat poison.
Yes.
And they took a ton of threes. And look, do they make more threes typically than they made last night? Sure. But that's in the context of the offense. You're moving the ball. You're getting that shot in rhythm. You're not just kind of standing there and, like you said, chucking them after dribbling a few times.
Well, a lot of South Carolina's threes that make this, that they've made this year, you have somebody like a Michi Johnson down in the paint or something like that kicks it out to somebody that has a wide open look. But again, you got all that movement. You're down there near the basket, drawing that defense in, and then setting up somebody that's on the outside as opposed to literally not even wanting to step foot within the arc and just chucking up threes.
Yeah, and that's what happened. And to another point of that, it was 19-19. I wrote this down, too. It was 7.5 minutes left. South Carolina ties the game at 19. The last 7.5 minutes of the half, Tennessee won a 16-5 run to take the 11-point lead. South Carolina went almost 4 minutes without scoring in that first half. And all of a sudden, Tennessee takes control. And then we talked about the 24-22 when Connect goes nuts. That's where this game, that 7.5 minute span of the first half changed the whole game.
Sure.
And it was a combination of they have a dude, you don't. Your offense wasn't moving the way it should. You're too stagnant, settling for threes. And before you know it, you looked up. And like I say, now you're pushing the boulder uphill the last 20 minutes. But to the credit of South Carolina, they just kept going. Tennessee would, again, remember the three-point play and the free throw Connect, hit the three and got fouled.
Yep.
Every time you felt like you were getting momentum, Tennessee did something to stop your momentum.
Yeah.
But you kept going and you kept going. You got to a three-point game with the ball, I do believe, and a chance to tie. Tennessee, look, South Carolina can play with Tennessee. South Carolina can play with almost everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But again, last night there were a few things that happened that turned that game, and obviously number one is they have that guy. We'll get to the free throws next. Obviously, that's a big topic of conversation. It wasn't the suite we were hanging out in last night. We will get to that next. Halftime show. By the way, our buddy Brad Muller, 12:30, going to talk some women's SEC tournament hoops. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. Roll until 3 here on the game. Halftime show with Terry Ford and Tyler Head here on the game as we roll till 3. Brad Muller coming up bottom of the hour. We're going to talk some women's basketball. Of course, we have our guy Elijah Campbell covering the women's tournament for us, sponsored by Cool Care. Let me give you the official. Let me give you the official on this. I got it right in front of me. Cool Care, heating, air, plumbing, and refrigeration, sponsoring our coverage of the SEC women's tournament. And we'll hear from Elijah next hour. He'll jump in with us and give us an update from what's going on there.
Unless he's been kicked out of the Bon Secours Wellness Arena.
Could happen. I mean, he kind of looks like a punk hippie.
It sounded like he might have been trespassing this morning when talking to Bill and Preston.
Yeah,
maybe.
He got there really early. And, again, we love him. But if you see that guy walking around aimlessly inside the arena.
You might feel a little suspicious.
By the way, carrying that suitcase.
What's in the suitcase, man?
Excuse me. Yeah, hey, Bob. Can you open the case? Because, look, it does. We won't go down the road, but just a little. The cases we have with our technical equipment.
They stand out.
They look suspicious.
A little bit.
Is that a nice way to put it? They look suspicious.
The first time I saw it, that was my immediate thought. I was like, you probably can't get that one past airport security too easily.
No. That's one, I won't lie. Every time we walk in, not every time, a decent amount of time we walk into a place, like I'll go site test a lot.
Right.
And when I'm walking into a place, I'm just a random dude. I don't have a station vehicle. I'm carrying this suitcase. It makes people stop and look. It just does.
It's even more suspicious if, say you're going to do a site test at one of our Firehouse Subs. You come in, you sit it on a table, and then you walk back out to get something else. People are like, what the heck is that?
Well, why is that here? Is it? What's up with that? Somebody call somebody.
Yeah, one of those dogs out here to come sniff it.
Just sniff that thing. So Elijah might be thrown out of the old Bon Secure there in Greenville. Well, also, Elijah will be doing the show with Jay today from Greenville, the site of the women's tournament. Of course, the women will go at it tomorrow, 11:30 pregame, noon tip. You can hear it here on the Game in Columbia. All right, so last night, and we talked about the number one thing to me in the loss last night was just Tennessee's got a dude.
Sure.
They've got one of the best players in America. And every time it felt like South Carolina had some momentum, Connect went, you think you're coming back in the game? Excuse me a second. Hold my beer. The other thing, obviously, Tennessee, 19 of 22 from the free throw line. South Carolina, 5 of 10. And I get it. I do. Again, if you just look at the box score, you go, wait a minute. Home team only went to the line 10 times, and the road team went 22.
And South Carolina never went in the first half, by the way.
Exactly. Well, part of that is because you took all your shots from 3.
Right.
You weren't aggressive. Now, look, am I going to sit here and say the officiating was phenomenal, wonderful, perfect? Of course not. I don't go down. I very rarely, and I might not have ever done this since I've been here, blame officials. Now, can an official make a call that alters and affects a game? Ask the Saints. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's why I always say this. Do everything in your power not to put the game in the hands of those guys.
Right.
You handle your business the best you can, because when you put the game in the hands of the dudes, like I always like to say, wearing the Foot Locker shirts, it can go your way, it can go against you. It's a 50-50 toss, and you just never want to put yourself in that position. So I'm not going to sit here and say the officials cost South Carolina a basketball game. I don't think that's why the Gamecocks lost last night.
No.
I really don't.
No. And there were certainly calls that could have gone South Carolina's way. There were certainly some calls that could have gone Tennessee's way, too. It was a physical basketball game. They let them play in some regards and were a little bit tight with some of the officiating in others. Now, there were certainly situations like Talon Cooper leaning into the guy as he was shooting the 3 where, as a neutral observer, you're like, yeah, that's not going to be a foul. You leaned into the guy. But, of course, Coach Pear is going to try and push for that, and the audience in attendance is going to believe that should have been a foul. But that wasn't a foul at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Michie Johnson got beat up coming to the rim a couple of different times.
That's the one
that people point to.
Right. Before Cooper, on that 3 where he tried to lean and get contact and just chucked it, and you're hoping to get a call, again, don't put the game in the hands of the officials.
Sure.
Michie did get physically assaulted, like, I don't think it was a time before coming down the court, and there was a no call.
Yeah.
And then though, in the scrum of the ball, South Carolina got a ticky-tack call. So I was just like, okay, I get you yelling, refs, you suck over that.
Right.
Understand that one. I do.
Can I pose a question?
No. Of course you can. Go ahead.
And I see this a lot when we have a tight game like this and South Carolina ends up losing. People always say, well, the officiating, they didn't want South Carolina to win. They didn't want South Carolina, to be successful. What would be the reason for the league, whoever the grand conspiracy around this, what would be the reason for them not wanting South Carolina to win?
Well, to me, if anything, this is a great story for the league.
Absolutely.
This is one of the, if not the best stories in America in college basketball. The best story in a power league, easily,
Sure,
is South Carolina. You live for this story. And wouldn't it be even a better story if they ended up with a piece of the SEC regular season title after being picked 14th?
Totally.
So, yeah, I'm with you. Look, I lived this when I was in Baltimore.
No, it's not a popular opinion to have, especially the day after.
But everybody in Baltimore thought the NFL hated Baltimore, thought Major League Baseball hated Baltimore, the Big Ten hated Baltimore, the ACC hated Baltimore and Maryland. It's kind of a complex that a lot of cities and markets carry in sports.
Sure.
And I have the same question all the time. Why do you think they would specifically not like you?
Yeah.
Why? And it's just, you go to it. I mean, I get it's human nature with fans.
Yeah.
But I've never bought that one. I never have, of the idea we're going to screw you. We had a meeting under the cone of silence, and we decided as a league we're going to screw you.
Well,
I don't buy that narrative.
And if you watch enough college basketball across the SEC, Big 12, well, whatever conference, there's bad calls in every game.
Yeah,
there's calls that get missed in every game.
Sure.
Like, it's not just South Carolina.
But here's the thing. I would say this. I say this to my friends in Baltimore. If the league was out to get South Carolina, why were they playing for a piece of the title?
Yeah,
Wouldn't they have screwed you in the Florida game, the Kentucky game? How about the Tennessee game in Knoxville?
Sure.
So I always hesitate on that one because no one's really going out of their way to screw you.
Of course.
That's why I always felt. All right, let's get the Lamont Paris cut real quick, Tyler, before we get to Brad Muller. This is Lamont talking about the discrepancy in fouls. Lamont brings up something I totally agree with about Tennessee, by the way. Go ahead.
We fouled them some. I'm not saying that. They drive really hard, but they're craftier. They're better gamesmen than we are. They're better gamesmen, and so it comes across as a foul more, I think. I'm not saying that we didn't foul them, but they're a physical team also. Yeah. They're a physical team. They body you off of screens. They body you as you, and I like that. I don't say that critically of them, but one of the consequences of that is that you often foul. I mean, that's just facts.
Lamont hit it perfect. Tennessee's really good at that game. They're crafty, the gamesmanship. I'm going to tell you what, the point guard Ziegler, and look, I'm impressed. You're 4'8", 5'9", 3'6", whatever you are, and you're playing Power 5 college basketball. That dude, if you breathe on him, he acts like you just shivved him in the prison shower.
So in professional wrestling, when somebody hits you with a move and you react to it, that is called selling. And there are some guys like Shawn Michaels was a phenomenal seller back in the day. You hit him with the elbow, he's going to go flying across the ring. Tennessee is really good at selling minimal contact.
They are the floppers I've ever seen. And the ironic part is they are so physical on the defensive end of the court. Sure. I was watching it last night. You see it on TV. When you see it live and you're really close like we were, Tennessee, every time you cut, you're getting a chicken wing from somebody.
Sure.
Or you're getting the business. I'll give you a wrestling. I'm giving somebody getting the business.
Yep.
Tennessee does not let you cut clean or drive clean. They're bumping you, they're hitting you, they're pushing you. They are constantly in contact with you when they're playing defense. And the ironic part is if you sneeze next to them when they have the ball, they fall down like you just punched them in the throat.
And that's the difference between a coach that's been there for a decade and has that culture ingrained and established, and a guy in Lamont Paris that's only in year number 2 that's going to take a while to get that as ingrained in the South Carolina program.
Gamecock players don't do that. I was kind of watching both last night on the defensive end of the court. Gamecock players just playing you straight up.
Right.
Tennessee guys are killing you. Then when it flips around, Tennessee's throwing themselves all over the place like they're soccer floppers. So Lamont was spot on with that analysis. All right, come back here. Brad Muller going to talk some women's hoops from the SEC tournament next on the halftime show on the game. All right, halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head. We'll get Brad Muller in here. So, Brad, I got to tell the story.
Yeah.
So I hit up Brad yesterday, and we've had Brad a lot at 12:30 because Brad has other things to do than just sit around waiting to talk to schmoes like us. So I text Brad. I even give him a choice. And Brad, 12:30, 1:15, 2:15. Brad goes 1:15. Okay, Brad. So I come on the air. Didn't even look at my text messages. I said we got Brad at 12:30. So. So I even gave you a choice, and I screwed you over. Sorry, man. That's my bad.
I'm glad I wasn't in the shower.
I know. It just was because Tyler comes in during the break. Did you tell Brad 1:15? I said, oh, bleep, I sure did. He goes, he's ready now. I'm like, good. So I appreciate you getting past my stupidity. Thanks, dude. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Hey, all right, so tomorrow, the Gamecocks waiting for the winner of the A&M Mississippi State game that is already underway. That was a noon tip. Let me ask you this, Brad. And look, this is not to be disrespectful to any like last year's team, for an example. Because last year's team obviously was undefeated, just like this one, and was looked at as the favorite to win the whole spiel. And they had veterans, they had an iconic player in Aaliyah Boston, all these things. Players are in the WNBA. And if I'm off my rocker, because obviously I am because I gave you the wrong time, this team, I'm not saying it's as good or better. I just feel like it's more versatile, especially on the offensive end of the court. They might not be as good in the paint or as fierce in the paint, maybe not as good defensively, but I feel like you can't do what Iowa did in that Final Four game to this team. You can't go put 5 people in the paint and say, we dare you to beat us with your perimeter people. This team can beat you with perimeter people. Have I lost my mind?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, it's night and day, really. You know, the previous 4 years, and it seemed like every game we were playing against a 2-3 zone as they would pack it inside against Aaliyah, who would still get a double-double, and then you hoped you could hit a few shots from the outside to maybe pull them out of it, or at least make them play honest defensively. This year, I think we've only seen zone maybe 2 or 3 times all year, at least on a full-time basis, because of the perimeter shooting. We've got obviously a good inside game. Maybe not, we don't have the National Player of the Year inside anymore, but we still got pretty darn good inside. But then when you've got what South Carolina has on the perimeter this year, the way Powell and Hall and some of the others have shot it off the bench, you have to play them honestly. You have to extend your defense, maybe play more man-to-man than you want to. And when you've got that with our bigs inside, against most teams, we're going to have an advantage one-on-one with our bigs. There are some teams, obviously, that can play with you as you get to the top 10 teams. But against, just the average team, they can't do both. You can't defend the perimeter and double down inside. So, as long as South Carolina is hitting some shots, it keeps them from clogging up the inside. So, no, you are absolutely correct. You were not crazy.
Well, this time, on this point, I'm not. But other stuff, I've lost my mind. Brad Muller hanging out with us, who will be on the call right here on 107.5 The Game in Columbia, 11:30 pre-noon tip tomorrow. Right now, A&M's up by 6. It's really early, about 2 minutes left in the half, but the winner of A&M Mississippi State gets the pleasure of taking on the undefeated top-ranked Gamecocks on Friday. Again, that's 11:30 pre-12 tip, like I said. All right, Brad, so when we look at, you and I had this conversation. I know you remember because you remember every time we talk. It ingrains in your mind because it's so special. We talked early in the year when they were off to that fabulous start, and it felt like they were averaging 200 points a game, and it was just crazy time how efficient they were on offense. And I asked you, I said, what's the one thing in your mind you need to see as the year goes along? And you said, look, this team lost a lot of leadership, a lot of seniors, a lot of people who have been through everything. And, I want to see who is going to take that mantle, or whom could be more than one person take that mantle. And we saw this team win a lot of close games, Brad. And then that LSU game, LSU was the better team for about 35 minutes. And what happened? South Carolina put their foot on the gas, made winning plays, won the game. Who has been, or whom, it could be more than one, has taken that mantle and kind of run with that leadership and that, follow me type of thing when the moments get tight?
It's interesting because leadership in previous years, I would say a lot of it had to do with what happened, off the court on a day-to-day basis. But I think the most leadership I've seen from this year's team is just what you said, what happens on the floor in the actual tight situations, whether it's Ashlyn Watkins, the way she's provided such a spark off the bench, or just other people knocking down shots. But I think one of the things that you can't overlook not just because of what she does. Tahina Paopao, what she's brought with the outside shooting and her leadership as a two guard and occasionally the point guard as well, is the shots she doesn't take. Because Paopao, as good as she is, one of the best 3-point shooter in the SEC. She's not a volume shooter. She's not jacking up 15 3-pointers a game. If you look at the box score, almost every game, she's only shooting 4 or 5 threes at the most every game, and she's probably going to hit 2 or 3 of them. But she's also looking for the open player inside or somebody who's got a better shot than she does. And if somebody does leave her open, then yeah, she's going to shoot it and probably knock it down. But I think that kind of leadership, that I'm one of the best shooters in the country, but I'm not going to jack it up. If you're open, I'm going to get it to you, and you're going to score. And I think that goes a long way.
Brad Muller hanging out with us, talking about the number 1 ranked undefeated Gamecocks in action again tomorrow in the SEC tournament, waiting for the winner of A&M Mississippi State. Okay, Brad, we just talked about how versatile this team is, how well-rounded they are. They can beat you in the paint. They can beat you from the perimeter. Their bench comes in. It's almost like an NBA team that brings in, the NBA teams substitute certain times of every game. If you got a good bench, you can expand the score. It almost feels like their bench. They're so deep when they bring just waves of people at you that could start on the other team, by the way. Defensively, they're still really good. What's the one Achilles heel that concerns you going into now as the postseason?
I think you're always going to be concerned a little bit defensively, even though the Gamecocks have been very good this year, and they've gotten better. That's always going to worry. But it's gotten so much better, it's not as big a concern. Really, the biggest thing for me is just getting the consistency on offense. This is the time of year when the legs get tired and stuff. So you're going to rely on your depth and defense to win games this year because, for the first, 3.5 months of the season, South Carolina was knocking down shots like nobody's business, especially from the perimeter. I think at one point as a team, they were shooting 46% from three-point range, about 55% overall from the floor. Then they had a little bit of a rut for about 2.5 weeks where, they had multiple games, maybe 4 or 5 games where they shot under 50% from the floor, or more importantly, from the perimeter, were shooting, in the 35% range or less. So they weren't as efficient with their three-point shooting, which obviously, can hurt you. It's hard to keep up the pace they were doing, but they went into a little bit of a rut. So you're just hoping that they didn't peak too early, that they can start knocking down those shots at a better rate like they were for the first half of the season, that they can kind of find their legs. If that's, to me, that's the biggest, I don't want to say it's a concern, but that would be the thing that has changed a little bit, is they just haven't been quite as efficient offensively. But on the other side of it, the defense has been good, and the development of some of the other players, Ashlyn Watkins over the last 6 weeks is just leaps and bounds a different player than when she started the season. And she was pretty good when she started the season, but just the player development has come a long way.
The important thing, you got the socks, right?
Oh yeah, I got all 3 sets of socks, the important ones that I usually use for the conference tournament. And they have to go in a specific order. So I'm doing my part. I've got them arranged in the correct order for each day. Now it's up to those young ladies that actually put the ball in the hole to do their part.
Because if something goes sideways, we're blaming your socks.
Well, yeah, it's to the point because one set of Lucky Socks has got a little bit of a hole in one of the toes, so I got to do some darning and make sure that doesn't leak out anything.
That's right.
So I've got to find a sewing needle.
Sitting there courtside sewing your socks. Our buddy Brad Muller on the call tomorrow, 11:30 pre, noon tip, does a phenomenal job. We always appreciate you, my friend. We'll be bugging you here soon as well. Thanks, Brad.
You got it. Thank you, guys.
All right, we'll see you, bud. All right, we'll come back in here. Add the Firehouse Subtext the hour, and we'll get back to our conversation about what Lamont Paris said about the fouls and how Tennessee kind of works it, because it is a thing. We got that coming up as well. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Tyler Head, right here on The Game. You ever heard this song? Very cool tune.
Oh, yeah.
I like this song.
This is it's a newer one.
Yeah. I never heard much of this group until I heard this song.
Yeah.
I was like, this is kind of cool.
This was, God, I feel like I was in high school maybe when this one came
This
out.
was back, has it been about 10 years?
Somewhere around there.
Somewhere like that. It's a cool
Which
tune.
I just realized it's been 10 years since I graduated high school.
You going to your reunion? Let's
Oh.
go, man.
You know what? They actually,
Let's do it.
I saw somebody that I went to school with that was like sharing the Facebook group about, hey, reunion, coming up in May or whenever it was. The people that I care to associate with from high school, I still associate with. I have like 4 friends from high school that I still talk to. That's all that I care to see. I don't care about the other people. I graduated with 400 people.
Mm-hmm.
The other 396, I could care less. I don't care what they're doing.
We struck a nerve. Look at you. Look at you over there. We struck a nerve.
Well, it's one of those things that, like, and look, I go back to my hometown as much as I can, and I randomly see people at Walmart or whatever, and that's fine, but I don't care to go to an event with these people.
My high school, I think my graduating class was like 25,000. I mean, we had the second biggest high school in Baltimore County.
Yeah.
Gigantic. And a great feeder system to the Maryland State Penitentiary. It was perfect. I graduated with tons of people.
Sure.
So it's like, when we have these reunions, we have them at M&T Bank Stadium. It's just crazy.
I remember graduating and looking around and like, who the heck are half these people? Where have you guys, you've been going here the past 4 years? I've never seen you before.
Until today. I never saw you walk the hall in 4 years.
Exactly.
All right. Firehouse Sub, text the hour, 803-404-6100. What you got, man?
So Brock weighs in and says, I feel like Michi and Talon both were playing for the foul at the end. Michi was taking the ball and driving into 8 people every single drive and getting a foul. The refs are not going to keep calling that. That's what Michi kept doing. You can't just spam the same play over and over again.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. I'll take it a different angle. And there's a Brad, right? Brock, good text, because you're not wrong. I look at it like this. I guess I won't put this the right way. I don't think running offense to get fouled is efficient.
Mm-hmm.
I think go play ball, and if you put yourself in the right position with your aggressiveness, you'll get fouled and you'll get a call.
Sure.
You should get a call. I watched like A&M when they played South Carolina. The A&M perimeter players it felt like they were going to the basket with the one idea to get fouled.
Right.
Not complete the play. It's almost like, if you play basketball, the term is pull the chair out from under you.
Yeah.
It's almost like don't guard them. They're not going in to make a shot. They want you to foul them. So if you just play solid D, they're going to miss their own shot because they're not going in to make a shot. They're going in to get fouled.
Right.
To Brock's point, I thought there were times late in that game, South Carolina was playing to get fouled more than they were playing to make a play.
Right.
Like Cooper. He might be my favorite player on the team. But that shot at the end to try to draw that foul, no, man. No, just be solid. Take a shot. And if you get fouled, you get fouled, but take a good shot. The goal here is to take a good shot, not to get fouled.
Sure.
So I agree with the texter saying, basically, you're just trying to get fouled. No. Run offense. Make a play to the basket or take a shot from the perimeter with the idea you're taking the shot to make it,
right,
not to get fouled. So good text. Very good text, 803-404-6100. Going back to the point that Lamont made real fast, I agree that Tennessee works it. The gamesmanship there is high-level gamesmanship.
Sure.
And they are really good at it. And that also, another reason why you don't put the game in the officials' hands. Because Tennessee is manipulating things on both ends of the court, especially when they have the ball. That's why you got to do everything. You make shots. Run. Don't be so stagnant on offense. Don't have your issues to where now you're chasing or pushing the boulder, and now the officials are going to come into play. So, but it was, again, I just go back to they've got a dude. They got a dude.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that. They got a dude.
A dude that, again, nobody gave, 2 rips about coming into the season. There's going to be a first-round pick in the draft coming up here in a couple months.
No, not at all. All right, real quick, we want to share a little something with you. The Nest on Gadsden, in the Vista, 70 years of experience. Those folks, in the words of the great Jay Phillips, know what's up. Whether you want to, get new appliances, redo that kitchen, just a different look. Maybe you want a new shower, bathtub. Maybe you want to get new fixtures, maybe new lighting. It's just, honey, the lights, If you want to change the look of your home, get to the folks at the Nest, because they're going to sit down with you and they're going to take the budget you have and take the ideas you have, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to make it happen for you. It's very simple. You call, you make an appointment. Don't just talk to them over the phone. Call, make an appointment, go in, sit with them, and they're going to take care of it for you. 1331 Gadsden, it's the Nest. They're experienced, and they will, whatever you need and whatever money you have to get it done, they'll get it done for you at the Nest. Again, 1331 Gadsden in the Vista. I will get back in here. Football in the 1 o'clock hour. We got some cuts from Shane Beamer we're going to get to as well, and talk about the tag in the NFL. It's been a friend to some and not to others. That's next on the Halftime Show on the Game. All right, halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head, 1 o'clock hour means football. And what else we talk about in this thing?
I believe you left out football.
Thank you. That's why I need your help. Sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors for over 40 years in the Midlands. Highest quality, best selection of windows and doors. AWDSC.com. Look at me. How about that? Only messed it up 15 or 20 times before I started getting it right. All right. So to kick off the 1 o'clock hour, let's focus on Shane Beamer talking.
Yes.
Now, who was he hanging out with?
So J.D. Piquel of On3 is doing a series where he's interviewing coaches from around the country. I think he's kind of focused on the SEC right now. I know he had Josh Heupel on today's show, but yesterday he had about a 15-minute conversation with Coach Beamer, which if you want to see the whole conversation, it's on the On3 YouTube channel. But some good insight that Beamer gave, as we're, less than 2 weeks away from spring practice starting.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, let's start off with, because a lot of talk was about this coaching staff and constructing this coaching staff. And it's been an interesting ride, I'm sure, for Shane putting his staff together in the offseason. And here is his philosophy with the staff hires. It's cut to.
Just how we can be better. You know this from being around the profession. I mean, every time you have an opening, it's always a different fit, maybe what you're looking for each and every time. And what I was looking for at one position last year or 2 years ago maybe isn't what I was looking for this year. And just trying to find guys at the end of the day that can make us better on and off the field. And areas where maybe we weren't good enough at last year, bringing in guys that can help more and whatnot, and feel like we have. I like the group that we have right now. It's a group of guys that want to be here, that was telling my wife, just the staff dynamic, the staff chemistry. We have been together a short period of time, but I can already tell there's a difference, and not that it was bad last year, but just a difference and more of a connection than what we had. And excited about the hires. They're excited about being here and eager to get to work with them.
That's interesting. More of a connection this year with the staff than last year.
So that's a classic case of let's read in what he did not say as opposed to what he did say.
Yes.
What does the between the lines reading of that mean to you?
There was a communication issue with the staff last year.
Okay, that makes sense. We know when talking about Montario Hardesty getting removed from the staff, there was a question of development with the running back room, and obviously you kind of had a mess of a situation last year where you ideally didn't want to carry on Jonah to be a running back. He ended up being one, and they once again were at the bottom tier of the SEC. Going back to his comments at the end of last week when he introduced Mike Ferry as the new wide receivers coach, there was a question of development in the wide receiver room with Step. Not to say the guys weren't being developed, but they weren't developed to the point that Beamer wanted them to be. So I think that maybe ties into what he's saying there too.
Yeah, I think that you hit them both on the head. For Coach Hardesty, if you've heard Shane talk in this offseason, he said something that I thought was that I really kind of had the eyebrow go. You know when you had the eyebrow? Mm-hmm. I had the eyebrow go when he was talking about there were things in the room that got to him. I'm paraphrasing it because it wasn't a shot at Hardesty.
Sure.
He didn't go out of his way to say Coach Hardesty failed at this. He was just saying sort of like, it feels like this, out of the things that, just piecing it together, listening to Shane talk different times through the offseason, there are things in the running back room the running back coach needs to handle.
Yes.
That don't need to get to the head coach. It's like anything, like in this, like here. We have a market manager that runs all the stations here at Cumulus.
Of course.
There are things that our station, she needs to be involved in, but she doesn't need to be involved in certain things. So if enough of the things I don't need to be involved in, I have to now get involved in, that's a problem.
Right.
Whether it's, the people themselves in some type of relationship issues or just overall, wait a minute, why aren't you handling this? Why do I need to step in, right?
Right.
And I think that's kind of the feeling of that is, okay, so there must have been things like, well, it's the last 2 years. Think about it. Mm-hmm. You had to deal with Anderson this past, he transfers, right?
Yep.
They didn't see that coming. That's a thing. Year before, you lost your leading rusher. All of a sudden, they couldn't get a hold of him and find him, and all of a sudden, poof, he's in the transfer portal.
Right.
Recruiting, look at last year. You got a 4-star in Braswell, but you end up starting a Division II. Not to say that's bad. Missouri did that, and it worked out pretty well.
Sure.
But all of a sudden your running back room is in flux, and the recruiting in the running back room, you don't have a guy ready to step in and take the spot. So you take Dakereon Joyner, who is not a running back, and to start the year, who is your starting running back?
Dakereon Joyner. Well, and going back to last spring, going through last summer, we just naturally assumed that, they'll get somebody out of the portal. Surely somebody will be willing to come in and take what at that point in time was really kind of an open role in being your number one running back, and that didn't happen. And there's a litany of reasons for why maybe that didn't happen. But again, Coach Beamer kind of assessed the whole situation and said, okay, some things in the running back room that aren't being handled the way that I want them to. It's not as attractive as we want it to be to these recruits or these guys in the transfer portal. Why is that? And again, he zeroed in on Montario Hardesty potentially being that problem, so he made the change.
And the other thing Shane said during the season that I thought was interesting, and we talked about it on the show, Jay and I, was when the running game was struggling, and we're all focused on the offensive line because, that's where it all starts. Shane would also say, yes, the offensive line's got to get better, and there's things we got to do up front. We've had some injuries, and we're trying to figure this thing out. But also, there are things our running backs can do better.
Sure.
And, yes, if your offensive line doesn't block, typically running backs have no chance. But what I'm guessing is in this situation was, Shane's watching the film, right?
Right.
He's watching the All-22. We can't get a hold of the All-22. Tell you what, that's the one thing about college football compared to the NFL that drives me nuts.
Right.
Because I love that. I've got the NFL.com thing, the package, NFL Plus. I can watch all 22 of every team.
There are certain games, like the high-profile games, where you might get it, like the ESPN Saturday night primetime, where you can have those viewing options. But, random games at noon on Saturday on the SEC Network, usually not.
Can't get all 22.
Which is what makes watching games in the press box a lot of fun, because you do get the all 22.
That's why I love sitting up there. Besides, we get to eat food all day.
Of course.
Is we got the all 22, and we love Steve Fink.
Yes.
Our guy. We do. Steve's great. He's going to set us up on Pro Day next week. We do. We love you deeply, Steve. Every now and then I'll get a text from Steve about if I say something incorrect. You got that one wrong, Tara. But no, we love Fink. But yeah, the all 22. So we're not watching the all 22 of the run game. So there might be things that when they're watching, whether it's Dal, Shane, whoever, they're doing their film breakdowns, like running backs might not be reading correctly. Or running back is not looking at the keys correctly, or that running back should have went here, but he went here. And maybe Shane came back to that was a coaching problem as well.
Right.
So there's a multitude of things here. There's recruiting, there's a development, there are things getting to the coach who should be staying in the room. All that together meant he needed to make a change. But development was a piece as well. And the wide receiver room, well, and I think you hit it perfect. It's not that they weren't developing the receivers. It's just Shane wanted to see them develop at a higher level. So you get a chance to bring in your boy at Georgia, whose name we will not say anymore because he's dead to us, who's a developer of wide receivers and an excellent recruiter.
Yeah.
And so you take Step because if Shane looked at Step as the level of the stuff that we think he was looking at with Hardesty, maybe Step would have been just let go.
Sure.
But the development piece wasn't there. But Shane wanted to keep Steph on the staff, and take the tight end room over.
Yeah.
And again, I get Steph. I want to be a wide receiver coach. Appreciate it, but I'm moving on.
Remember, Beamer kept him on staff because he didn't want the backlash of the community for firing the local guy.
Exactly. Well, that's the word on our text message feed and social media.
Let's not go down that hole again.
No, we're not. So the development thing's a thing. And you've heard it a lot with Shane, whether it's running backs, wide receivers, development's a thing. The thing that is interesting, though, is the entire defensive staff stayed intact, which we will get to. But first, let's grab another Shane Beamer cut. Shane, talking about, I think let's go with the message that he gave to the team, the first cut, message over the winter to the football team.
Yeah, I think the thing for us is looking back at last season, record-wise, we didn't finish where we wanted, but we weren't far off either. We had an opportunity to win every game going into the fourth quarter, and we just, in a lot of those games, we just couldn't get it done. We couldn't finish and couldn't get over the hump. So taking a step back and just looking at everything that we're doing and how can we be better and just challenging every single person in our program to be even more personally accountable. That, you know, it starts with each individual and being better than we were last season, including me as the head coach, and to be the reason that we have the success that we want to have this season. And really proud of our guys, the way that we've worked. We're going into, as we record this, we're going into spring break next week, and then get ready to crank up with spring practice when we come back. But really like what our guys have done since we came back in January, and we've been going at it since the Monday of the national championship game is when we started winter workouts, and really like this group coming back and their maturity and how they're going about their business.
Yeah, I mean, you're 5-7, and yeah, Shane's right. They had an opportunity to win pretty much every game in the fourth quarter. They were in position in some way, shape, or form to get a W. We talked about this all through the season, Tyler, is they just didn't make the plays. There were times in a game where if they make the play, either momentum changes, you could maybe even take the lead, or you could stop the opposition from maybe taking a lead or extending a lead.
Sure.
Whenever it was, and look, most football games when they're close, there's what we say, 5 to 10 plays that matter.
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina, unfortunately, was always on the not making end of the plays compared to the other team. Stone Blanton, I'll give you an example. Stone Blanton's play against Jacksonville State.
Right.
It looked like Jacksonville State was going down
We were
to get that score, right?
We were sweating a little bit on that one.
We're up in the press box all going, you're kidding. And Jacksonville State was going in.
Yeah.
And we might be talking about a whole different result. And then Stone Blanton makes the pick and goes pick 6 to the house.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about. There weren't enough of those plays through the season for South Carolina.
Well, let's look at it on the flip side. We talk about that Florida game so much where if you close out that game the right way, you prevent one of those 2 fourth downs. We're talking about a 6 win on the season. If you don't have that weird turnover at the beginning of the Clemson game and can score another touchdown, you win that game too, and suddenly we're talking about 7-5 and going to a bowl game. And yeah, it's not the 8-win season you had the year before, but pretty on par with what you had done. And again, you would get that 13th game, the extra practices, all that kind of stuff. We're having a different conversation coming away from this season. But again, it's those couple little minute things that are the difference between being 5-7 and 7-5.
Yeah, I mean, the Florida game, you make a stop. Somebody step up and make a play. Make a Stone Blanton play.
Right.
Make that play that Stone Blanton made in the Jacksonville State game. Someone make that play in the Florida game, and you're going bowling, and maybe you're 7-6. And again, it's not what you wanted, but you're going to a bowl game for the 3rd straight year, and you get your extra practices, and you can tell everybody, hey, my first 3 years, we've gone to bowl games every year.
Yep.
Instead, you're 5-7, and you got bitter beer face. Just not enough plays were made, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Not enough plays were made. Injuries had a thing on offense, wiping out the offensive line, wiping out the receivers a lot of the time. Run game, again, part of it was the offensive line. Offensively, you had so many injury problems. But for, what would you say, Tyler, for a little bit over half the year, the offense was still moving the rock.
Yeah, they were. Despite the inefficiencies he had on the offensive line, it could have been worse.
Yeah, and just your defense up until November, your defense just was not making plays to stop the other team or to make plays to win games for you.
Right.
And that was, to me, the biggest thing in that 5-7. You just gave 2 examples. You could have been 7-5. Every game you were in some way, shape, or form when it was go time, when it was money time.
Right.
But you just couldn't make, like kicking 55 field goals at Missouri. How about a couple touchdowns? Maybe we're talking about a different football game.
Sure.
All right, so we will come back and continue here from Shane Beamer. J.D. Piquel from On3 sat down with Shane. We're going to get to that, more of that next. We're going to jump into, we were talking about the receiver room, talking about receivers who can step up, and also the quarterback situation. That's coming up next. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head, hang until 3 on the game. All right, we're rolling the halftime show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head here on the game. Go till 3. This time tomorrow, we got hoops. 11:30 here in Columbia, 107.5. We will have the women in action. Their first game of the SEC tournament. They have the double bye.
It is looking very likely like they're going to take on Texas A&M. A&M holding a 51-30 lead in the final minute of the third quarter over Mississippi State right now.
They've smacked Mississippi State in the third quarter, outscoring them 24-9.
And that's kind of the surprising thing. I talked about this with Elijah earlier on the extra point. Mississippi State has a very high-scoring offense. In fact, they beat A&M pretty handily earlier this year when these two teams played. So the fact that A&M, who does have a good defense, is holding them at bay is a little surprising.
Yeah, Mississippi State, I haven't dug into the numbers, but I bet those shooting percentages. Look, ready? First quarter, 9 points. Second quarter, 12 points. Third quarter, 9 points.
It's not going to get it done.
No. All right, so 11:30 pre-12 o'clock tip here on the game in Columbia. South Carolina, the top-ranked and undefeated Gamecocks. Looks like they'll take on the Bulldogs, Mississippi State, but they have a long way to go. We'll see. All right, so we've been listening to some cuts of Shane Beamer on J.D. Pickell's show, podcast on 3. Want to get to the next one. Let's talk about the quarterback room. First of all, Shane was asked about what will it take to win the quarterback job. We'll start with that one, Tyler, on cut 6.
Yeah, great question. I think just the leadership and the intangibles you want at the position, and somebody that can lead our football team. And then for me, it's really just being able to, protect the football and make good decisions. And we've been a defense here at South Carolina defensively all 3 seasons that I've been here as the head coach. We've either been first or second in the SEC in takeaways defensively. So we need to continue to do a great job of creating turnovers on the defensive side of the ball, but we need to do an even better job offensively of protecting the ball. And we didn't do a great job of that in 2021 or 22. We were better in 2023, but still not good enough. So just a guy that'll make great decisions and lead our offense and give us a chance to win football games.
It feels like it's going to be Lenore Sellers. There's no guarantee, but it feels like it should be Lenore Sellers. And honestly, Robbie Ashford couldn't, come here, learn under Dow Loggins, have a really nice. Well, first of all, Ashford has to be head and shoulders above, I think, Lenore Sellers. The coaching staff's never going to say that, but it feels like Ashford has really got to wow you. Where it's like, all right, it's like, and I'm not equating Lenore Sellers to Muhammad Ali. I'm saying whenever you're like, people always would say like the heavyweight champion, not just Ali, but anybody who's a heavyweight champion, you got to take it from them.
Sure.
You can't like outbox them and get the decision. You've got to soundly beat them where everybody who watched the fight knew that you beat the heavyweight champ. I think Sellers is such an incumbent and their hopes for Sellers are so high that Ashford's really got to come in here and take that job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Sellers gets the benefit of the doubt from having been here this past season. We know that Dow Loggins has already talked about building the offense around him this upcoming season. Now, Robbie Ashford runs a similar type of quarterback in this offense, so it's not like he's a pocket passer compared to what Lenore Sellers is. They're a similar type of quarterback, so theoretically he could slide in and fill that role. But I agree with you. I think he has to be leaps and bounds better than what Sellers is, because if it's kind of a tie, the tie is going to go to Sellers.
Yeah, I think so. All right, and then Shane also talking about the quarterbacks with J.D. Pickell about giving them live reps in the spring.
I would think. Now, we've done this every year that I've been here, and we did it last spring. We did it last August with some of those young quarterbacks that haven't been hit. We want to, I don't want to say let them get hit, but we need to throw them in the fire. So we had some scrimmages. I remember a scrimmage that we had last spring when Lenoris got here, that he was live and we did allow him to get tackled. And it was a day that not many of our defensive guys could tackle him. So he likes that. Like, he gets mad if you don't make him live. So we'll be smart with him and all of our quarterbacks. But, you always worry about your quarterbacks getting hit. But then you also, the other end of the spectrum is you blow the whistle too quick. And then all the quarterbacks, if they're competitors, they come to you and they're like, there's no way that guy would have tackled me on that play. So it's kind of like you got to balance both of them.
Yeah, you do. I mean, and look, you have competition for a gig.
Yep.
So you got to let them go out there and be like Spencer Rattler. You weren't letting people get too close to Rattler, right? You just weren't last spring. You know,
If somebody did, it's when you put the arm around the shoulder and say, "Now listen, know you're trying to show out. Know you're trying to be a practice all-star. Don't touch Spencer."
we have to keep our hands off of him. He's very important. I think you're going to see more live quarterback play where you need to see some things, right? You just do.
Did we see? I feel like Sellers was live in the spring game too.
Yeah, he was live.
Rattler wasn't. I feel like maybe one of the other quarterbacks wasn't. But when Sellers got out there, because he had that
Sellers was live.
touchdown or the 2-point conversion at the end of the spring game where he took it in, so he was live.
He was
in
live.
that game.
Yeah, most of them were live. Rattler wasn't. I think Doty. I'm trying to think if Doty was or not. But that would have been it.
It may have been Spencer being the only one that wasn't.
Maybe, because I know that Spencer wasn't live. The only one that might not have been maybe was Doty, but I think everybody else was. And live is a nice way to say you can hit them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hit them. These guys you can hit.
Well, and that's a good point that you brought up there, especially when you talk about quarterbacks that like to run these RPOs or when they're flush in the pocket that, if you really want to judge how good they are, you'd like to see how far they can get before they get taken down as opposed to, if he got his hand on him, that means you're down. Or the Sounders like, no, I would have broken that.
Because that's really part of his game. It's a huge part of his game. All right, let's get to the wide receivers. Here's Shane talking about the wide receivers that could step up this spring. It's a big room of people, either guys coming in through the portal who haven't played here or guys coming back from last year who need to develop, get better, step up. Here's Shane talking about the receivers.
Really, I'm excited about every position when we get out on the field for spring practice, but probably none more so than the wide receiver position, just because there's so many unknowns there, and I'm eager to see kind of who does separate themselves, because I believe we got a lot of talented guys in there, but they're young. Whether we brought in Jared Brown, a transfer from Coastal Carolina, Amari Huggins-Bruce, a transfer from Louisville, and Gage Larbadane, a transfer from Miami of Ohio. So there's 3 transfers that we've brought in. I really like the freshman class that we brought in, 2 freshman receivers. The freshman that we had on last year's team, I'm excited about, but there's a lot of unproven guys in there. And it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out in spring practice. It's a talented group. They're fast. They're athletic. We have a lot of potential in that room, and really confident in the group, but fired up to see who does separate themselves and shows that they can be a guy that we can count on this year.
Let's get to that in the next segment, the wide receiver room. Let's break that down a little bit. Terry Ford Tyler Head halftime show. We are hanging here till 3 on the game. The Men's Clinic of South Carolina is here to help you. Yeah, they're here to make money. Who isn't? It's a business, but they're here to help you. And that is their business. 803-875-MENS. You're a guy, we're getting older, and it stinks. You're not who you used to be in a lot of ways. You want to be. You feel like sometimes you are, but it could be a lack of sleep. You've always slept like a rock. You don't sleep like it anymore. Your workouts, you're not happy. You feel weaker. You don't bounce back from the workout like you used to. You brain fog. Where do I sit my phone? Where is my phone? Or you have a lack of drive, whether it's life, sex, professional, personal, whatever. You just don't have that same oomph that you used to in any room of the house. Might be low testosterone. It could be that simple. One way to find out. Free confidential consultation with Dr. Dan and the staff of the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Go in. If they think you could be low T, they'll do lab work. If it is, they'll put a program together just for you. Men's Clinic of South Carolina, give them a call.
Welcome back in. It's the halftime show. Tyler Head and Terry Ford along with you on this Thursday afternoon. Continuing on football, and more football. Right there at the end of that last segment, we heard from Coach Beamer talking about his excitement level for this wide receiver room coming up for this upcoming season. A lot to figure out there over the course of the spring and the summer because you lost Juice Wells, you lost Amirian Brown, you lost, obviously, Xavier Legette. You lost a lot of production in that room. So when you look around, yeah, you got Harbor back. Yeah, you got Tyshawn Russell, who had minimal impact on this team a season ago. But with all these guys coming in the transfer portal that you listed a moment ago, you don't really know, as far as the pecking order, who's going to work out to be your best guy just yet.
And that's the thing. And you look at the guys coming back, you brought up Russell. Saw him a little bit there as the year was progressing, we saw him a bit. You saw him a lot against Georgia. And you saw him, and all of a sudden you didn't see him anymore. Now, part of that was Nick Harbor was getting more run, to be fair.
Sure.
But all of a sudden, Russell disappeared. And you're like, okay, what happened to that guy? And that could be part of, what we're talking about with the receivers is, yeah, he's developing to this point, but you want him to develop to that point right now. You think his development, and everybody develops different, and it's not the same template, but in Shane's mind, he's looking at his receiver core saying, I'm not seeing the development I'd like to see.
Right.
And, you got the Mazio Bennett's who are going to be rolling through here. You got Nick Harbor who, man, if you can take those physical gifts and make a wide receiver out of this guy, how dangerous is that going to be?
And that's kind of an X factor, too. You just mentioned Mazio Bennett. Also got DeBron Gatling, a pretty big get right there, in the most recent signing period. We don't know what those guys are going to be. I mean, they could pop as freshmen and end up being leading receivers themselves. We don't really know. Elijah Caldwell, somebody that we talked about so much leading up to the season last year that basically turned into a ghost once the season started because he didn't really get a whole lot of time on the field. There's more unknowns than knowns when it comes to this wide receiver room. The good thing is you have a ton of bodies in there. So hopefully with that amount of guys, it ends up working itself out where you can establish who your top three guys are and figure out who's going to occupy each of those roles. And you have plenty of guys that can occupy the slot between the three guys that you brought in in the transfer portal. Some of them had the opportunity to move around and do a couple different things, but that's going to be the biggest thing. And in addition to having your new wide receiver coach coming in Mike Fury, that they're going to have to figure out over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, Elijah Caldwell's a great, I mean, we forget he's even here now.
Yeah.
During the ramp up to last year.
Oh, he was the August MVP, it sounded like.
We heard about Elijah Caldwell doing this and doing that, making plays here, making plays there, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, we didn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
Nobody even said, what happened to Caldwell? It was in the ether. So, yeah, it's like offensive line. That's what's interesting about this team. We'll get to an offensive line cut from Shane here in just a little bit. This team has a ton of interesting players in the offensive line room and in the wide receiver room. And there's so many people there, and decent amount of them are highly looked at, like four-star kids, whatever, that somebody's got pop. I mean, Harbor was a five-star athlete, made a wide receiver. Bennett's a four-star. You've got just some interesting pieces in that room, plus the transfers. I love Brown from Coastal Carolina. I keep saying it over and over again.
Right.
That is a yak yard maniac. And, yeah, is he going to be as yacky in the SEC as he was at Coastal? I don't know. He could be. Sure. I got no clue. I just know this. His skill set, his average yards per route was like 4 yards.
Yeah.
And he averaged, 15 yards a catch? Mm-hmm. That's because they just threw him these little bubble screens, in little short routes off the line of scrimmage, and they go, okay, to go make people miss. How the pieces are all going to get put together is on Dow, obviously.
Sure.
But there's a lot of potential in the wide receiver room and that offensive line. There's so much depth. You got to shake out five guys at work, right?
You do. And one more note on the wide receiver room here, and I posed this question to Wes and Chris a little bit earlier on. We know that Nicholas Harbor is doing track stuff right now. We don't know how much of spring practice he's going to be involved in, and especially when you talk about a new wide receiver coach coming in, getting an assessment of the room in addition to developing guys. We don't know how much time Harbor's going to get with him over the course of spring practice and the spring game and all that kind of stuff. How far does that set him back going into the season? We don't know, because the common thinking is, okay, first year as a wide receiver as a freshman, you learn some things, kind of get the kinks worked out, and then the next year is when you take that big step forward. How much does him doing the track stuff potentially set him back a little bit?
I remember, did you read that same deep dive that I did? It was in the State about a day with Nicholas Harbor.
It's quite a schedule.
It's crazy. I got tired reading it. And he does do his best to be involved with the football side of this.
Sure.
But
can't be in two places.
It's like anything. If you're doing two things, you've got two. You got two mistresses, right?
Right.
So you're not going to be as involved in either one as someone who's just doing track or someone who's just doing football. Plus, the whole body thing is different.
Oh yeah. Well,
Harbor's lost. I think he lost. He lost what 10, 15, 20 pounds.
There's a different kind of shape to be doing sprinting at track as opposed to what you're doing in football.
Yep.
Playing wide receiver.
And here's another. I remember when DK Metcalf decided he wanted to go run a little track. And DK Metcalf is fast for a football player.
Right.
DK Metcalf was a track guy, finished near the bottom.
Yeah.
It's a whole different animal. And so, it's going to be interesting to watch Harbor as this thing develops, how he develops, because he's dealing with two different things that he wants to do at a high level. I mean, for a freshman in the SEC, what I have seen, he's held up pretty well on the track.
Right.
He really has. And he's only going to get better. And by, his junior year, he's probably going to be popping like nationally as a track guy.
Right.
So we'll see. But to the football side, which people here care deeply about, obviously, it might be something where he doesn't develop as fast as you want him to because, again, he's also got something else going on that he might be doing it at a world-class level.
Sure.
So, and you watched him last year, and you saw little glimpses of stuff where, man, if he could do that consistently, you got something. And he had some drops because, again, he's never played wide receiver before. He played tight end and edge pass rusher. A lot of people who have watched him as a high school player said he really should be playing edge pass rusher.
Right.
They said he was a demon off the edge. But I get it. I want to be a high-level Olympic sprinter. Probably not the best idea health-wise if I go be an edge pass rusher.
Sure.
I get it. And look, I understand South Carolina. You look at that athleticism and you go, yeah, man, we'll make you a wide receiver. Let's do it. Because if you can crack that code with him to take that athleticism and that ability and that speed and all that stuff and chisel a wide receiver out of that cat, man, you got something. Absolutely got something.
Right.
So we'll see where the wide receiver position goes. I think most of the production this year, my guess, and again, this can change, it's called development. I feel like the transfer portal guys, especially early in the year, are going to be doing a lot more of the heavy lifting with this wide receiver core.
Just from the experience alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. All right, we will come back. I'll hit some more Shane Beamer. We're spending the hour with Shane. It's an hour with Shane. As he talked with J.D. Piquel from On3, we are going to take a little spin here and discuss the trenches because you hear it all the time. The SEC, it's a trenches conference. So we'll hear Shane talk about the trenches, I'm guessing, on both sides of the ball. That's coming up. All right. So the women we talked about playing on 107.5 The Game tomorrow, 11:30 pre-noon tip. This gets weird this weekend. This could get really, really weird.
Very fluid.
We also have baseball on The Game tomorrow evening as well.
Yes.
So both you get baseball 6:45, I believe, pre.
By the way, we have some tickets to give away.
And we're going to do that in just
game.
a second.
Yes.
So that's tomorrow night on The Game. The women are tomorrow right beginning of the afternoon. Saturday, and we'll give you more of this as we put it together. If the women win tomorrow, which we're guessing they will, Saturday we will have men's basketball on WNKT. The Game, 107.5 The Game. We will in Columbia. We will have baseball in our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW. And we'll have women's basketball on another one of our sister stations, 98.5 WOMG.
Right.
That's the way this thing could be working on Saturday. And Sunday, baseball on The Game in Columbia and women's basketball again on 98.5 WOMG.
Yes.
That is tentatively how this thing is going to be the next few days on The Game. And obviously in Myrtle Beach, they'll be carrying men's basketball and baseball in Myrtle Beach. So,
right.
Let's do the tickets.
Yes.
Caller number 1004. No. How about let's go? Boy, you would love that, wouldn't you? You don't cuss. You'd be cussing me. Let's go caller number 7 and caller number 8. We have 2 pair, right?
Yep, we do.
Caller number 7, caller number 8, right now, 803-404-6100. Love Chevy phone
This
line.
is for Friday's game.
For Friday's game, give us a call. A pair of tickets if you're caller 7, a pair of tickets if you're caller 8. Right now, give us a holler. We'll get back in here. Firehouse Sub Text the Hour is next on the halftime show on the game. Time for our Firehouse subtext, the hour 803-404-6100. Tyler Head, what do you got, my friend?
Yeah, so going back to the conversation about last night's game between Carolina and Tennessee, Roger weighs in, in reference to South Carolina falling short in that one. He says Tennessee also have probably the most underrated, greatest coaches ever in Rick Barnes, somebody that's been around the game for a long time, had a lot of success. Maybe hasn't taken Tennessee quite as far as the potential of some of the teams that he's gotten into the tournament, but a lot of people believe that this might be the year, especially with a guy like Kennett, where they could possibly finally make that Final Four run. And Barnes, by the way, lofted a lot of praise towards South Carolina and what Lamont Paris has done, in his short time here last night after the game.
Yeah, we're going to get to that when what's trending at 2. Coming up, one of the cuts we'll get is Rick Barnes and his glowing praise for what Lamont Paris has done this year, which, again, speaks for itself. We'll get more into that coming up. And, yeah, I mean, Barnes, the reason Barnes is so underrated is just it's so weird. If you look at his resume, Tyler, it's a strange resume. And every now and then I bring this up and I have to go back and get his resume. At Texas, Rick Barnes made the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
And also got to Elite Eights and Sweet 16s. And then all of a sudden, he stopped. He didn't have any success getting there at Providence or Clemson. Got to Texas, started having success in the NCAA tournament for a period of time, then went dry again.
Yeah.
It's a very bizarre resume. Okay, I'm looking at it right now. 1 year at George Mason. In his 5 years of Providence, he had a .590 winning percentage, but never got past the round of 64 in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
All right, gets to Clemson. Did get to a Sweet 16 at Clemson, but the other 3 times in the NCAA, one and done, and had a 600 winning percentage at Clemson. Then he gets to Texas. This is where he had almost a 700 winning percentage. Okay, fourth year. Let's start the 4th year of his tenure. Sweet 16. Next year, Final Four. Final year, Sweet 16. 2 years later, Elite Eight. 2 years later, Elite Eight. You're like, this guy's got it going on in the tournament.
Sure.
After that, round of 32, round of 64, round of 32, round of 64, missed the tournament, round of 32, round of 64. That's why I became the ex-Texas head coach. That was 7 years at Texas in a row, didn't get past the second round.
Which, again, the level of expectation of Texas, very high.
Especially when you go to the Final Four, 2 Elite Eights, and 2 Sweet 16s in a 7-year span.
Yep.
Only 1 year out of that 7 years did Texas not at least make the Sweet 16. Right. So now you've really, you brought it up. At Texas, their expectations are crazy to begin with. Then you do that for them in an 8-year period, Tyler. Then you stop. So then you roll off to Tennessee. And now Barnes has gotten to 2 Sweet 16s. Remember last year they made that run to 16. It was kind of unexpected.
Right.
You had the COVID year. You've been to the round of 32 twice and the round of 64. So a little bit better at Tennessee regarding getting to the Sweet 16, but still has not seen an Elite Eight since 2008. And since that 2008 Elite Eight run, has only made the Sweet 16 twice in 3, 6, 7, 8, 11 tournaments.
Yeah.
Only 2 times in the last 11 tournaments has he gotten out of the first weekend.
Right.
It's just a bizarre resume. It really is. But the man has won 800 games. 800 games. And he's been successful at 4 different universities to a high level. To the texter's point, you're right. He's very underrated, but I think it's because a lack of consistent success where it matters the most.
Yeah.
But he's a hell of a basketball coach.
Absolutely. And as we've mentioned, you got a dude this year in Dalton Kennett. That could be the missing piece to go to. And I asked Russell Smith from Fox Sports Knoxville this yesterday, is this the year they finally put it together? And he basically said they got the pieces to do it. This is the ingredients to make one of those kind of runs, and we'll see if they can.
And connect is the key. Connect, and that's not a genius take. Connect is the key. If he can play the way he has played this year and be that dude like he was last night. I mean, there are nights he has better numbers, but last night, every time they needed a bucket, who got the bucket?
Him.
He's got to be that guy in the tournament for them. And if he is, we've seen players have great runs through the NCAA tournament. So it can be done. He's got to be that guy, but also Adu and Ziegler, they have to get double digits. those guys have to at least give them something to where it's not all connect. And last night, to their credit, and you brought up in the first riff of the show, both the Dew and Ziegler scored in double digits. In the game in Knoxville, the South Carolina won, let's see, it was Dalton Connect, Dalton Connect, Dalton Connect. So we'll see what they do. This guy makes them dangerous in the NCAA tournament.
Absolutely.
Absolutely does. All right, we appreciate the text, and you're spot on. Rick Barnes, very underrated. All right, we'll come back in here. What's trending at 2? We got that coming up from Traditions Fine Jewelry and Gamecock Traditions. And we'll hear from our buddy Elijah Campbell at 2:15. Give us a report from the women's SEC tournament in Greenville. We'll find out who South Carolina's playing on Friday. That's coming up. Halftime show with Terry Ford and Tyler Head. Also on our little schedule of many, many millions of things. We cannot forget that we have this cool contest from Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. It's a Grand Slam giveaway. We're up to $275. No Grand Slam yesterday.
Not yet.
I believe we're up to 300.
They did not leave the bases loaded in the abbreviated 6 innings yesterday, but did it 3 times the other night.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're up to 300 now, and you can qualify. It's just like the special teams contest if you did it during the football season. You go to 1075thegame.com, you look for that little flippy thingy, you click it, you put your name in there, submit. Do it. You got to do it every week.
Speaking of baseball, a little bit of a nugget for this weekend's pitching rotation we can share at the 2 o'clock hour.
We'll get to that. What's trending at 2, and we'll talk about the game a little bit. That was yesterday. We haven't gotten into yet when the Gamecock baseball team got the rain shortened win over Davidson. That is coming up in our final hour here on the Halftime Show. Terry Ford, Tyler Head. We're rolling on the Game Network in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. Just want a mosh pit, even though I'd get killed in there right now.
You know, and don't tell Jay I said this because he might strangle me, but I'd never heard of Fish prior to working here. It's one of those things, like, I'm sure I had heard their music before, but I was not aware of who they were. And then I meet Fish's biggest fan in Jay Phillips.
There's no doubt. Okay, does Jay love the band Fish more than Dave loves the duo Larkin Poe?
Ooh,
Run that one through your head. Think about it.
I don't know if Jay's ever camped out to meet Fish.
Do you think Fish has a restraining order against Jay?
Probably not. So I might give the nod to Captain Dave.
Our boy Dave loves him some Larkin Poe.
I was gonna say I don't know how many Fish T-shirts Jay has, but Dave definitely has his collection of Larkin Poe apparel.
Yeah, he got something on one. Did you see it the other day?
I saw that. He said it was a hot sauce, but like the way it kind of spilt, it looked like it worked. I was like, don't tell people. Just be like, oh, it's part of the design, because there was like a red kind of streak on one of the, I don't know their names, on one of them.
Could have been Larkin, could have been Poe. I looked at it, I said, Dave, it just looks like one has a rash.
That's right. Or like it's one of those like off-color type things.
Yeah.
Like it looked very artsy.
Well, you ever see those commercials now for people with like skin conditions?
Yeah.
She has a skin condition.
Yeah, why not?
That's all. All right, what's trending at 2 here on the game? Let's start off with some baseball. Give me a baseball highlight there, Tyler Head. I believe it's a cut 14. Matthew LeCroy got himself a knock, and it just scored a run in the win over Davidson yesterday.
The 1-2, LeCroy lines it to the left side and through for a base hit. Lee Ellis comes home to score. Dylan Brewer held up at third base. Talmadge LeCroy tacks on an RBI here in the bottom of the second, and South Carolina leads it 3-1.
Yeah, it was a game. It was just, and it was on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW, because of basketball. It was a game where Davidson scored in the top of the first, and South Carolina put a 4-spot in together in the first and second inning, and then nothing happened afterwards.
Yeah, they only went 6 innings, so that they got past the halfway threshold. Rain came in as we expected, washed the rest of the game out. I don't know a ton you can glean from this game, but South Carolina got the win at the end of the day.
There's one thing you can, to me, and this is a thing, it's a thing right now, not to say it's going to be a thing as the year goes along, because it's kind of like a peak and valley kind of deal. 9 more guys left on.
Yeah.
You got 4 hits in this game, plus South Carolina drew 8 walks from Davidson pitching, plus there were 2 Davidson errors, plus 2 other Gamecocks were hit by pitches. So you had, I believe, 16 base runners in 6 innings. You only cashed in 4 runs from it. Officially, I think you left 9 on base. Look, these things a lot of times, again, are peaks and valleys.
Sure.
Knocking runs in, batting average with runners in scoring position and stuff like that. But this is something you want to start getting a good taste, because the last thing you want is for this to start getting in people's heads.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it gets bad, is when, you always talk about in sports, Tyler, especially baseball, things are contagious. Like a batting order, it's contagious. Everybody's hitting. Everybody's getting on base. Everybody's driving in runs. Then you get the flip side. No one's driving in runs. And all of a sudden, you're in the on-deck circle going, God, I hope Head gets a knock here, because I haven't had a knock with runners on base in a week.
And look, so much of the game is mental.
Yep.
And it really is about those kind of things, that mindset of saying, oh, no, nobody else is doing it, now I got to step up. And, then you're overdoing something in some area, maybe swinging at pitches that you don't want to. And I go back to what, Coach Kingston said after Tuesday night's win, where, he's like, hey, we had a meeting before the game today. We addressed with our hitters what the issue was and how we can work on improving that. And then they went out there and left, I think, 12 runners on, including the bases loaded 3 times in the first 4 innings. So it's not something that's going to change overnight suddenly, but they are aware of the issue. They're working on it. Again, Monty Lee has done wonders with this hitting staff in his not even 2 full years here so far. So I have confidence that they're going to clean it up. You have now 4 more games before you start conference play against Ole Miss next weekend to fine-tune some things. And, when you get into the SEC play, runs are going to be at a premium. So you definitely want to clean that up.
And everyone's already played any baseball at any level, and it was competitive. You know what we're talking about here. Like, if you're going well and you've come to the plate and you've had success driving in runners, if they're, like we say, ducks on the pond, you're strutting up to home plate saying, All right, I just got to keep doing what I'm doing. Good approach. I just want to barrel it, and I want to knock in runs. If you're struggling, though, and you've been struggling, you don't walk up with the same strut. You just don't, because like you said, it's between the ears, a lot of baseball.
And it can be really easy to look at, having 2 guys on or having 3 guys on and being up there at the plate and saying, well, I got to drive all these guys in, and trying to hit that grand slam ball so somebody can win our Palmetto Citizens Fair Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway, as opposed to saying, hey, let's focus on solid contact. Let's get the ball into some of these gaps. Maybe I drive in one run. Maybe I drive in 2. Let's just get something going here. Again, as opposed to saying, all right, I got to knock all these guys in right now.
Yeah, and so you don't want it to get to that point mentally where you have a collective batting order all going, God, I hope somebody else knocks in the run because right now I just can't knock in a run to save my life. You don't want to get like that. And, of course, no one's saying that's where they're at, but you don't want to – because these guys all have – I mean, Cole Messina has a track record. Ethan Petrie has a track record. You got guys on this team with track records of success offensively. So we're not saying everybody's going to totally go in the dumper together, but you don't want that mentality to start seeping in because, again, it can become human nature at times when you're not being successful in that situation.
For this weekend series, taking on Longwood, which, by the way, do you know where Longwood is located? We talked about this earlier. Were you listening?
Oh, is it? It's somewhere in the United States.
Well, no, it's in Canada.
I'm thinking, you know what? I thought I knew this. North Carolina?
No, a little more north.
Virginia?
Yes, Farmville, Virginia. They're the Lancers. They have the horse logo. I don't know where you get Lancers from, but Longwood Lancers, a little bit of what is that called, alliteration coming in this weekend. A little bit earlier on, about 20 or so minutes ago, Carolina released their rotation for the weekend. So
go for it.
You have Eli Jones on Friday as expected. Dylan Eskew on Saturday as he's been. TBA on Sunday, though. Roman Kimball, not the announced starter for Sunday. Now, this past weekend, he shuffled things around because you were playing one less game. Eskew started the second game, which was on Sunday, but you had Kimball coming out of the bullpen. Now, we don't know if he's aggravated his injury once again. We don't know if this is a performance thing, which it shouldn't be. He's pitched fine up to this point.
He's been solid.
But as of right now, you do not have a Sunday starter listed.
Very interesting. Because you think if Kimball's healthy and good to go, he would be the starter.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that. We have to.
And it could be one of those situations where you assess, because Becker's been coming out of the bullpen, and he's somebody that we know factors in to the starting rotation at some point, was thought to be maybe a weekend starter prior to the season. So maybe you assess it and say, okay, how much work do we get out of the bullpen? Do you maybe slide Becker into your starting role on Sunday, depending on if you use him on Saturday or Friday or something along those lines? So it could be kind of a wait-and-see type of approach. And, again, Kimball came out of the bullpen the other day because you had an abbreviated series against Clemson. Maybe he does end up being your Sunday starter. Maybe you just wait and see, depending on how you decide to use him the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, because everything with the rain out throws everything out of whack. Becker yesterday went an inning, gave up an unearned run. Ellis had an error. Did walk 3, struck out 2, but did walk 3. Didn't give up any hits. So it was, you get out of it. You give up no unearned runs, but it was what's that phrase I like for pitchers these days? You minimize the damage.
That's right.
You minimize the damage, but you weren't clean in that one inning. So
yeah, and speaking of minimizing damage, I know Eli Jones's 9 hits that he gave up against Clemson in game number 1 really stand out. 9 hits, only gave up 2 runs though. So for the damage of that amount of hits, you mitigated the damage with the amount of runs that you gave up. So it wasn't a perfect weekend for anybody pitching across the board. Hopefully this is the weekend you kind of reset things against a team that you theoretically should have a little bit easier time going up against.
Yeah, and you're ramping up. Because the SEC, it's coming. The SEC's coming. I think you start with Ole Miss, if my memory serves.
You go on the road to Oxford, which really, I mean, you played the one game on the road against Clemson, but you haven't had a true full-on road environment minus that one game, which, again, is only an hour and a half up the road. It's a different story going however many hours away on the road against Ole Miss and Oxford. So it'd be interesting to see kind of what they figure out this weekend and what they decide to do from a lineup standpoint going into next weekend.
Now, as we look at numbers, you bring up Roman Kimball. Kimball's pitched in 3 games. ERA of 2.89, a whip of 1.21, 14 Ks in 9 1/3. Now, there are 6 walks. You want to drop those. That's really been the thing. He's only given up 5 hits in 9 1/3. Opponent batting average is 152. The walks have been a killer, but only a 2.25 ERA. So, or 2.89 ERA, I should say. So, Roman Kimball, we'll see.
Yeah.
Because a TBA isn't off performance.
It's not. And again, it could be something to do with that lat injury that he and both Matthew Becker had in one of the last scrimmages before the season started. Maybe he re-aggravated something, and they're just trying to be careful because, again, it's Longwood. You should theoretically be fine. If, I don't know, maybe move Eddie Copper into that starting role on Sunday if worse comes to worse, and you need to do something along those lines. But you'd much rather have a healthy Roman Kimball for the Ole Miss series as opposed to throwing him out there against Longwood.
And that might be the thing. You might just be, let's get this guy 100%.
And again, we have no further context than this right now.
No. And you talk about Eddie Copper. You know, you look at a 1.35 ERA in 4 games pitched, a whip of 1.07, a strikeout roughly an inning. Copper's been really good. Opponent batting average 196. So look at the stats. I mean, for a freshman throwing midweek for you, especially off that first appearance, where remember his knees were shaking.
For sure.
Copper's come a long way. Absolutely.
Very impressive.
All right, so we've talked a lot about the victory or the loss the men had last night at the hands of Tennessee at CLA. Rick Barnes in the postgame, very complimentary about Lamont Paris and the job he has done with the South Carolina Gamecocks in year 2.
Zakai, but first of all, that was an unbelievable college basketball game. 2 teams I thought just fought their hearts out, and I can't say enough about us coming in here winning because the job that Lamont has done here, I mean, it's amazing. Really, the turnaround that he's put here and his team, for them to go into the last week of the season with a chance to play for an SEC regular season title speaks volumes. But he's got terrific players, but what he's done is something that he should be commended for, and I don't think there's any question. I told him this, and I believe it. If I had a vote, I'd vote him National Coach of the Year because this year is, I can't imagine the SEC ever being any better than it is this year, and for him to do what he did is quite remarkable.
I mean, it has been a phenomenal year for Lamont Paris in this basketball program, and you can't let last night take your eye off of that. You just can't.
Minus winning the SEC regular season championship, which, yes, that would have been fantastic. It doesn't really change anything in what this team can accomplish. You still have the shot to be one of the top 4 seeds and get the double bye in the SEC tournament. You're going to be somewhere around the 5, 6, 7 range, depending on wins and losses over these next couple games with the NCAA tournament. You're locked into the NCAA tournament. Like last night would have just been another, feather in the cap that maybe could have given you in the conversation for like a 4 seed or something like that if you knocked off Tennessee. But losing them doesn't derail you. It doesn't change anything. In fact, the fact that you played them to a 7-point game is impressive to a lot of people around the country.
Absolutely. Let's get a Lamont Paris cut here as we were doing what's trending at 2 on the game. Let's grab cut 19, Tyler, just the issues of the night for South Carolina and the loss.
I mean, there were a lot of things. I thought, some of it was offensively for us. We got in some good situations. I thought some of the threes we had in the first half were pretty open.
Yeah.
We missed a bunch of those. And then we coupled that with some, a couple uncharacteristic things that in a game like this ultimately end up making a difference, right? We foul a three-point shooter, which, my angle, it didn't look like there was a lot, but we fouled a three-point shooter. We would love to have that single point back. You go 5 for 10 from the free throw line. On a day like this, you may have to go 10 for 10.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of day. You got to generate, you got to capitalize on the points that you generated there. So, a couple chases against Connect that put him in a situation that was a little less difficult than what we would have liked when it was all said and done. But the effort of these guys, you feel bad even feeling bad or angry at all. There's no anger in this one at all. Our effort was so good, was so incredible. They wanted to win so badly, and they did it as a team. And we just didn't play great and made too many mistakes. And you're doing it against a really good team. Let's not kid ourselves. It's a really good team that came in here.
The good news is you didn't bring your A game, and you still cut this thing to 3 at the end. You just couldn't get over the hump there. All right, we'll come back into Elijah Campbell live from Greenville. We'll talk about who South Carolina will be playing tomorrow, 11:30 pregame, noon tip. Elijah coming up next, brought to you by Cool Care, heating and cooling and plumbing and refrigeration. Coming up here on the halftime show in the game. All righty. We are rolling. What's trending at 2 here on the game? We are trending in Greenville right now, talking to our buddy Elijah Campbell, covering the SEC Women's Tournament. And, of course, we want to thank our pals at Cool Care Heating, Air, Plumbing, and Refrigeration for sponsoring. Really, without those guys, Elijah is hitchhiking.
Well, we got to give him his proper introduction.
Oh, geez, go ahead. I forgot.
Following the #1 ranked Gamecocks through the SEC Women's Tournament.
Live from Greenville.
Unbreakable, unstoppable, undefeated South Carolina.
Sponsored by Cool Care Heating and Air. Don't miss your bank shot with your HVAC or plumbing. Check them out at coolcarehvac.com.
Here's Elijah Campbell on the Game Network.
All right, now we get Elijah Campbell in here. We got the official intro. All right, man, so who's South Carolina taking on tomorrow at noon?
So tomorrow they will be taking on the Aggies of Texas A&M. They avenged their early season loss to Mississippi State and came out and won pretty convincingly. Led for almost the entire game. It was tied at 1 point at 6-6. They took the lead back and they never looked back. So a pretty dominating performance from Texas A&M today. So tomorrow, South Carolina will get a rematch of an early conference season opponent in Texas A&M, where they won by 30+ at Reed Arena from earlier.
Surprised that A&M won the way they did?
I kind of am surprised a little bit. I thought Mississippi State would have a better time generating more points. I mean, Texas A&M has a top 25 defense in the country in terms of just raw defensive rating, and Mississippi State is top 25 in assist rate this year. I figured that would probably play into Mississippi State's advantage. They won by double figures when they played at Reed Arena earlier this year. So I was a little surprised that A&M won. I'm really surprised that they won. The final score was 72-56, but there was a garbage time 3 at the end. And it ultimately it was a 20-point game for most of the fourth quarter. A&M did a fantastic job of generating, a lot easier looks than I thought they would, and actually, converting them. They're not a great shooting team, but they dominated inside the paint this afternoon, scoring 36 paint points against Mississippi and had 3 players in double figures, and it ended up being a really balanced attack and a pretty dominant showing, and that's, I think, the real surprising part.
And I don't think it can be understated. This is an A&M team that hit the skids at the end of the regular season, losing 5 out of the last 6. So to have not only a victory like they did today, but in dominant fashion, again, against a team like Mississippi State that is routinely scoring a lot of points themselves, averaging in the 70s coming into this game, that is a very impressive for Joni Taylor's bunch.
It is, and they held Jerkayla Jordan, who was a second-team All-SEC player, to 3 of 13 shooting and only 9 points, and a majority of that came in the first half. Jordan was the main source of Mississippi State's offense in the first half, and she was a total non-factor in the second half. And the biggest thing, Tyler, I think that you mentioned them losing like 5 of their last 6, so they lost their last 3 going into this SEC tournament. They were going into today on Charlie Cream's first team out of the NCAA tournament. This Mississippi State team was one of the last 4 in. After today, probably wouldn't be surprised to see those 2 teams flipped, and maybe you see A&M inside the tournament picture and Mississippi State outside of it. That's going to be a tough discussion for the committee to have, but Mississippi State surely didn't do themselves any favors this afternoon by dropping a game to a fellow bubble team, especially one that was as close to the tournament field as A&M is.
I mean, Mississippi State's lost 6 of their last 7. This isn't the team that beat LSU.
Yeah.
They've been scuffling too, man.
Oh, yeah, and that's a fair point, too. Both of these teams have kind of fallen, rear backwards into this SEC tournament. And the one thing Mississippi State could really hang their hat on was that win against LSU, in which they played incredibly well. And both of these teams have just had losses to some more questionable opponents, too. And you looked at A&M's schedule, Mississippi State started off pretty hot and had that big win against LSU. A&M has had, a good spreading of bad losses, including one at Georgia early in the conference season. So they have a couple black eyes on the resume. But today is one where if it does come down between Mississippi State and Texas A&M for that last spot in the tournament, very well could. It wouldn't be a stretch for the committee to say, well, I know which of these 2 teams is playing better right now, because we got to see them prove it on the floor just, a week before the tournament's being fielded.
And, of course, South Carolina and A&M played earlier in the year. A 35-point nail-biter.
Exactly. I mean, if you take away the first 21 points that South Carolina scored in the game, then, it was only a 14-point game. If my math is correct, that's 2 touchdowns. That's 2 scores. Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. We're talking basketball, not football. It wasn't very close. It wasn't very close last time.
All right, Elijah Campbell hanging out with us. We are live from Greenville at the SEC Women's Tournament, brought to you by Cool Care Heating, Air, Plumbing, and Refrigeration. Okay. Any news out of the Gamecock camp? Anything we got to take a look at? Is there anybody tweak a calf? Anything going on we need to know rolling into tomorrow's game that you can hear right here on the Game in Columbia?
I think we're all set in terms of the full health of the team. I saw Camila Cardoso walking around the facility here earlier before the A&M and Mississippi State game. A couple of Gamecock players were having like their SEC tournament media shoots in the concourses of the arena. As far as I know, everything is good to go, and Dawn and her coaching staff were watching the game in the scouting section of the media tables. So they're locked and loaded, pulling up scouting reports, and as far as we know, it's 100% rolling into the most important few weeks of the year.
Elijah, the most important question, though, and I saw this on the coverage on the SEC Network earlier, Dawn Staley's dog Champ is in attendance. Is he being accommodated properly out there in Greenville?
Oh, I have yet to see Champ, and that's very unfortunate. And I'm going to be on the lookout for Champ. I might take a stroll here through the bottom of the concourses if I can see Champ, just to try to find him. But no, no Champ sighting from me. But if he is not being well accommodated, then we're going to have some words with Mr. Sankey.
I'm sure he has his own suite.
He better have his own suite with his own food bowl and his own water bowl.
Let's be honest.
They should let him on the sideline for being real.
He should have a little doghouse next to the bench. No, a bed, not a house.
He absolutely should.
Nice little, one of those state-of-the-art. Have you seen these dog beds lately? They look nicer than the mattress that we would have. He should have that kind of dog bed. And someone should be sitting there.
He should get a Tempur-Pedic.
Right. With the chain. He could change his settings on how he feels. And
he's got reclining settings on there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And someone should be sitting there with the job of just dropping dog treats in his mouth through the game.
Some GA would have a whole lot of fun feeding Champ and making sure that he lives like a king throughout the game. And if I'm a GA, that's the job I'd take. I'd volunteer for that.
There are a lot worse gigs for GAs than that. There's no doubt. Elijah Campbell hanging out with us.
That's the truth.
Another SEC report from the women's tournament in Greenville. And in a half hour, you'll jump in here and hang out with that Jay Phillips guy, and you guys will roll the post-game show.
I know. I hope Jay remembers what I sound like. We haven't gotten to do a show together in a hot minute, so I'm hoping he remembers what I sound like.
All right, good deal. Thank you, bud. We'll talk to you next. We'll talk to you. Well, we won't talk to you tomorrow. We'll talk to you sometime. We'll talk to you soon. Whenever. See ya. Have a good one.
That's right. We're always in touch.
That's right. Elijah Campbell live from the SEC Women's Tournament in Greenville. Again, on the game in Columbia, 11:30 pregame, noon tip. South Carolina, Texas A&M. Last time they played, Gamecocks won that squeaker by 35.
Yeah, it was a tight game.
Yeah, that was whew. So that is coming up tomorrow here in Columbia on 107.5 The Game. It's March 7th, Tyler.
That would be the greatest day in the history of the world.
Next, here on The Game. All right, time for the greatest day in the history of the world here on the game. We'll start at old school because it's kind of interesting. This day in 1954, the Minneapolis Lakers and the Milwaukee Hawks experiment by raising the baskets from 10 feet to 12 feet during an exhibition game. Unacceptable.
Interesting.
I like watching people dunk basketballs.
Do you think
how many people can dunk on a 12-foot rim?
I was going to say, thinking about it, was how often do you think they were throwing it down back then?
Oh, in 1954?
Yeah.
There were a lot of Skywalkers throwing down would throw down on a 12-foot rim then.
Oh, yeah.
The 10-foot rim, there weren't that many back then.
That's right. I mean, we all at some point in our driveway lowered the rim all the way down so we could feel like we were,
of course,
MJ dunking, right?
Right, exactly.
And then you get in like gym class and you're like, oh, that's really high.
Well, now as I've gotten older, I look up and go, you sure they didn't put that 12 feet? Man, that thing's up there.
Wow. Which, by the way, is it weird that the Lakers didn't change their name when they went to L.A.? Because it has no significance to L.A. at all.
I mean, you're not telling me there are a lot of lakes? It's not the land of 10,000 lakes?
Not to my knowledge.
Really?
That is a name that is very specific to the Minneapolis area.
Well, it's like the Utah Jazz.
That's
How
true.
many great jazz clubs are there in Utah compared to New Orleans?
It's true.
It is interesting how you just keep the name.
I guess so. It's stuck, obviously, but when you're like, and it's one of those things like you say it without even thinking about the context of it, but it's like, yeah, Lakers. There's not a prevalence of lakes in the LA area, to my knowledge.
You got beaches, you got an ocean, you got Botox. You don't have lakes.
Yeah, why not the LA celebrities?
Yeah, exactly. It always made me laugh. That one and the Utah Jazz are the two that really cracked me up.
Sure.
All right, on this day in 1970, Austin Carr scored an NCAA tournament record 61 points. Carr played for Notre Dame. They knocked off Ohio University. Carr was 25 of 44 from the field, 11 of 14 from the free throw line. 61 points was an NCAA tournament record. Speaking of that New Orleans Jazz team, in 1974, New Orleans is granted an NBA franchise. There you go. What's more synonymous with New Orleans, you think? Jazz or Pelicans?
The team or the actual Jazz itself?
The Jazz. Like, there's a lot of Jazz. Is there more? Do you equate New Orleans more with Jazz, or do you equate them more with Pelicans?
Definitely Jazz.
I'm not saying there's no Pelicans.
I don't know if there are Pelicans.
Because you have the Gulf Coast right there. Yeah. I don't know if there's any Pelicans running around the Gulf Coast. Maybe there are.
I always thought Pelicans were more of like a Eastern Seaboard type of bird. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't know. It is kind of weird.
It's a little bizarre, but it's okay. I mean, when I was in New Orleans, I only went to the French Quarter. Sure. So I really don't know much else about New Orleans and the Superdome. That's all I got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like when you compare it to like the Saints, which is a perfect name for New Orleans team. Pelicans just doesn't quite hit the same.
Jazz much better.
Like the minor league baseball team in the state, the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, like that is perfect.
Yes.
And they have a great little stadium, by the way. That works, and you associate it perfectly. But New Orleans, not really like beachy when you think of Pelicans.
I'm not thinking about Pelicans running around. How about Pelicans in the French Quarter?
I don't think you see too many of those.
I've seen a lot of. Do you know if you're walking around the French Quarter after a few too many hurricanes at Pat O'Brien's, and you start seeing pelicans,
you got a problem.
That's an issue.
They could call them the New Orleans Beads. That'd be more apropos to the area, don't you think? And here's the thing: everybody would get it too.
That's one of the 5 best things you've said in over a year.
I got a million of them.
The Beads. And if someone goes, I don't understand. Oh, let me tell you.
You'll get it.
And then you go like this. Perfect. That might be the most perfect name for any franchise in New Orleans.
You asked what's more synonymous, the Jazz or Pelicans. Beads are more synonymous than both of them.
Beads more than anything. Beads more. I'll never forget the first time I was going to New Orleans. And they were like, gotta take beads. Why? Well, let me explain this to you.
You'll see. You'll thank me later.
So I bought a suitcase full of beads. And I left with an empty suitcase with no beads. Anyway, beads. That was good. 1987, Thomas Hearns wins his 3rd championship, WBC light heavyweight title with a 10th round knockout of Dennis Andres. Hearns was really good. He gets overshadowed by some of the other, famous middleweight type boxers of that era. Because then it wasn't, Mike Tyson brought the heavyweight division back. But like when I was growing up and I was a young Terry Ford, it was, Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran. You throw Hearns in there, Wilfredo Benitez. And there's a lot more. I mean, Aaron Pryor. I mean, there's so many really good boxers from that lightweight to that welterweight area. Mm-hmm. And Hearns was fabulous. He just wasn't Sugar Ray Leonard or more. The first round of the Marvin Hagler Thomas Hearns fight is still arguably the greatest round of boxing you'll ever see.
You mentioned Mike Tyson. Did you see the news earlier today?
No, what's he doing?
Mike Tyson is going to fight Jake Paul on July the 20th.
God, let me say this. I don't hate Jake Paul. I've got no feeling on Jake Paul. But I am hoping, again, we might die, I'm hoping that Jake Paul reassesses his thoughts on boxing after Mike Tyson. And I'd like to see Mike Tyson go, puh, haven't done that since Holyfield. Puh, there's your ear back.
Right. He's 57, but, I mean, if you ever seen a video of him, like when he still takes jabs, I mean, he's not as pristine as he was 30 years ago, but he can still hurt you.
I'm going to tell you what, if Mike gets a hold of him, it ain't going to be pretty.
I might have to check that one out.
You know what? I don't care about the Pauls at all, but I might put an eyeball on it in a certain situation just to hope that Tyson does really bad things to him.
Sure.
That's all. That would be entertaining to me. All right. 2012, Lionel Messi becomes the first player to score 5 goals in a Champions League soccer match. 7-1, Barcelona got the victory. I hear he's pretty good.
He's living in Florida now.
How about that? Hey, and selling tickets. Living the good life.
Going to the grocery store unnoticed.
Oh, compared to his other life?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nobody knows who he is in Florida. Well, no, I shouldn't say nobody. Very few. Compared to, put it this way, more people know who Jimmy Butler is in Florida than Lionel Messi.
One of them soccer boys.
I don't trust them. They don't touch a ball with their hands.
Yeah, I don't like soccer.
I don't like it. Ain't manly enough. 2015, Kentucky becomes the first men's basketball team from a major conference to go undefeated in the regular season since Indiana in 1976. Now, Wichita State went undefeated, but they were in the Missouri Valley in 2014. And Missouri and Wichita State, of course, I think, and I'm going to use my memory here, that 2014 Wichita State team in the NCAA tournament, I believe, got beat by Kentucky.
I think so.
I could be wrong, but I think Fred Van Vliet was on that team, that Wichita State team. And that 76 Indiana team went undefeated and won the national title. Last one to do that was the 76 Hoosiers. And the year before, Indiana was undefeated, and a guy named Scott May broke his wrist. So they might have gone undefeated in 75. That was a powerhouse, that Indiana team in the mid-70s.
Right.
But, of course, that Kentucky team, they got beat in the Final Four by Wisconsin. And 2016, Peyton Manning announced his retirement, much to the emotional distraught of one Jay Phillips. So 2016, Peyton Manning announcing his retirement from the Denver Broncos, and they haven't been the same since.
But we knew it was coming. After that Super Bowl, I mean, he couldn't feel the tips of his fingers and throw a football to save his life that last year.
The man had no neck left.
Yeah, we knew, and I know they asked him after he won the game, what are you gonna, when are you gonna make the decision? He's like, I'm gonna go drink some beer and think about it. We knew he was gonna retire.
He was done. God love him, he was done. It was done. He struggled so bad physically through that.
He got benched for Brock Osweiler that season.
What does that tell you?
And then the Texans paid Brock Osweiler a buttload of money to not do anything.
It shows you just how bright the Texans were at that time.
Again, I brought the stat up yesterday. The winningest quarterback since Peyton Manning retired for the Broncos, Trevor Siemian with 13 wins.
It has not gone well.
And they wasted a first-round pick on Paxton Lynch.
And think about this. Oh, that was an awful pick. Think about it. You had John Elway and you've had Peyton Manning in the last, 40, 50 years.
You had Tebow for whatever that was.
And there are people that still go, Tim Tebow, he quarterback in the NFL. No, he couldn't.
He was a quarterback in the NFL is what he was.
Great college quarterback whose skills did not transition to the NFL.
And if Demaryius Thomas didn't take that ball the rest of the 80 yards, nobody still wouldn't be talking about it.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Greatest day in the history of the world, March 7th. We'll come back in here. Firehouse Sub, text the hour, 803-446-6100. Get our buddy Jay Phillips in here as well. Get you ready for the post-game show. Elijah in Greenville at the site of the SEC Women's Tournament. All that is coming up on The Game. Time to get to the old Firehouse sub text of the hour, 803-446-100. What do you got there, Tyler Head?
Yeah, so in reference to talking about team names, I mentioned the Longwood team that's coming in for baseball this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Their mascot is a Lancer, which it's like just kind of glancing at their logo. It's a horse. Justin weighs in and says, you joust with a lance. Jousting involves riding a horse. And upon further review, there is like a joust spear looking thing below the horse in their logo. It's just not the featured part of the logo, I guess. So I guess there's the implication that there was someone riding the horse with the Lancer, which I don't know why you wouldn't be like the Jousters necessarily. That might be because you're talking about, because that'd be like Florida State being the Spears. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about just a physical object as opposed to like the person performing the task.
It's interesting. If you're the Lancers, plus if you're the Lancers, wouldn't you have that lance more like in your face?
Yeah.
If you're the Lancers?
I just glanced at their logo and it was a horse, and I thought it was like, oh, Broncos or something like that. But no, they're the Lancers, but it's just kind of like featured below the horse head.
That doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway, who are we?
Yeah, that's right. Who are we, right?
Who are we to tell you how to, get your image of your own mascot? That's whatever. But appreciate the text, though, because that told us, okay, we get it. Thank you very much. We were kind of going another direction.
Right.
So thanks a lot for the text, like always. Just, you would think you would have, like, maybe, the dude from the Knights of the Round Table holding a lance.
I guess.
I don't know.
Hey, we don't name these things.
Yeah.
I just learned this morning they were in Farmville, Virginia.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a place.
Me either, until just now. And now we know I wonder if that's I wonder if they do a lot of lancing in
you know
that
what?
area of the country.
Maybe they have like Renaissance fairs.
You ever been to a Ren fair?
I have not. Have you?
No.
That's not
my wheelhouse.
That's not mine either. Nothing against it if that's your thing. If
you're into, go get them.
If you're into LARPing, you're familiar with LARPing?
I've heard of it.
Live action role playing.
Yep.
If that's your thing, that's cool.
I mean, there are people who do the Civil War reenactments.
Yeah,
they do the Ren fairs.
Medieval Times. Hey, Medieval Times is fun.
I never went. I wanted to go. There was a Medieval Times maybe 20, 30 minutes down the road from me in Baltimore.
Right.
I wanted to go. I never went. But I hear it's kind of cool.
It is pretty cool.
I really do.
I mean, it's like you're transported back in time.
See, I just never thought about the Civil War reenactment, the Ren fairs. Like Williamsburg has a historic area in Williamsburg where they actually, it's a town, it's historic. They're living in the late 1600s, early 1700s. They're churning butter and they're wearing all the stuff. And they actually, and again, they're going home to real lives. But
sure.
That's the thing, that the town is it takes you back in time.
Yeah, you're like observing what life would have been like 500 years ago.
Man, no phones, no cable.
Hey, you guys got Wi-Fi here?
Hey, excuse me, butter churner. Can you hold up a second?
And is that one of the places where they stay in character the whole time? They're like, I don't know anything about your fancy communication device.
Excuse me, alien. I went when I was a kid.
Okay.
I was in elementary school, so I can't really remember that, if they stayed true to character or not. I'm hoping they do, because that'd make it even cooler.
Hey, kid, I'm doing a thing here.
Sort of like
I didn't know they had menthols back then.
Scene in Airplane where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar grabs the kid and goes like out of character.
Yeah.
Does that guy grab you by the shirt? Look, kid, let me explain something to you. My probation officer got me this gig. Don't bleep it up for me, okay?
You're going to watch me make this horseshoe, and you're going to keep your mouth shut, okay?
Or I'm going to nail one to your face, all right? So thank you on the text line for giving us a little knowledge on Longwood and the Lancers. Appreciate that. Thanks. Going back to last night in the loss, and we've kind of broken it down on and off through the show. Just the idea, look, at the end of the day, South Carolina struggled on offense in the first half. Settled for way too many threes. And interior-wise, Tennessee, the first game, it really didn't resonate. Tennessee's length and size inside.
Sure.
It was more prevalent last night than it was in that first game in Knoxville. Tennessee also pushed some pace when they got rebounds. There was a couple times they got a rebound, either the rebounder brought it up himself or got a quick outlet, and they really put some stress on the South Carolina defense.
Right.
that was an interesting thing that we haven't seen yet this year that we saw last night. Now, obviously, Lamont and the staff will go, okay, we got to do something about that. One time, I forgot who the Tennessee rebounder was, brought the ball straight up court and went right to the rack and got fouled. And, like, a couple of South Carolina players look at each other like, it was in the first half. They were like, thought, why didn't anybody get him? And he just went coast to coast. So that was a little interesting thing that I think is going to be something that's got to get cleaned up. But again, Tennessee had a dude. And you saw that dude last night hit big shots. Fine work.
Thank you.
Post-game show. Elijah's in Greenville. Jay's here in studio. That's coming up next on the game.